I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest, Hilary Knight. Hilary is changing the landscape for women in sports. After fighting for pay equity and with the USA hockey leading up to the 2018 Olympics, she's a gold medalist and currently spearheading the development of new and more sustainable women's hockey league, PWHPA. So we're going to be discussing the future of women in sports and the fight for equality for the next generation of women players. Hilary, welcome. It's great to see you.
Yes, wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Whereabouts are you in the world?
I am in Minnesota.
And how is Minnesota?
Honestly, it's gotten a lot warmer since a couple weeks ago, so I'm very happy with that.
That's good to hear. Hilary, I want to jump straight in because you've had an incredible career. And for those that aren't familiar with hockey, can you tell us a bit about the new hockey league, the PWHPA, and where is the league at right now?
Yeah, isn't it an acronym? It's such a mouthful sometimes. So Professional Women's Hockey Players Association. So actually, we're a collection of players, which is a player-led and player-driven organization that essentially saw a need to sift through all these opportunities for the future of the sport at the professional level to grow for women's ice hockey. And the three categories that we kind of looked at that we needed to change were, one, the accessibility to training opportunities, two, programming, so that's our competition schedule, and then the third was the visibility piece. So people might not be familiar with hockey, but they're familiar with the Olympics, and from that, everyone rediscovers the sport every 4 years. So unless you're on a national team, really, these other players don't exist, and we've got a tremendous amount of talent. So we saw a huge gap that we needed to fill, which started this conversation of, why don't we get the best players in the world together, or I guess the best players in North America together, and go out on tour and hit these traditional hockey markets to continue to combat the visibility component that we always have an issue with for women's sports. And by the way, we're also going to provide programming and training resources along the way. So it's been a wild run, but we've had an extremely successful year one. Obviously, a global pandemic threw us into a shuffle for year two, but we just played at Madison Square Garden last weekend, and we're playing in Chicago at the United Center on Saturday. So a lot of exciting things now are coming through.
That's awesome. And what are the next steps, and how can people support? And particularly given we're sort of in this, I think we're sort of getting out the other side of it, but given the pandemic.
Yeah, well, so the big thing was, having bigger brands see value in our product and what we had, because we know that we had a phenomenal product. And, how do we connect that with the viewer? How do we increase that engagement just with women's sports, but specifically ice hockey? So we just had a collection of brands sort of hop on, which has been phenomenal. Not only does it provide the validity that we need and the credibility in that space, but also the funding to help support the association. But I think women's sports are always starved of the platform to be able to perform and connect with the fans. So accessibility is a huge component to it. So, I encourage everybody to tune in whenever you can to support women's sports. But specifically, I've got my passion in ice hockey that we're currently working on.
And as a woman in sport, and having just gone through the last 12 months, how has the pandemic changed the future for women in sports for the better, if anything?
Yeah, I think because we saw everything sort of come to a halt, there's more time, there's more content creation, ability to increase connections with the technology we have. Everyone's got, the Zooms and social media and whatnot. And what came out of that was, I think, more focus, right? We were able to watch the NWSL, soccer, or football, depending on where you are in the world, have their success and have somewhat of a season, and the WNBA to have them have as much success on the court, but then equally with their social impact off the court. So it's an exciting time. I don't know what's happening in the world, what's going on with the culture and where we are in the world right now, but it seems to be the right time for women to really take on their industry by storm. So it's a long time coming, but I'm happy to be one small piece in that movement.
Yeah, I agree, and I see the women's sports and leadership in sports for women really trailblazing when it comes to inclusivity and accessibility. And we had Kathy Engelbert talking actually at this summit this time last year, who's commissioner of the WNBA. What you talked a bit about accessibility. What opportunities are there right now to use sport, do you think, to create a more inclusive society?
Yeah, well, there's different initiatives that that you can work on, and I don't know if it's the sort of the Olympic hat that I wear, but we're always looking to promote, peace through sport, or transcend sport, and there's so many life skills that you can learn through just lacing your skates up or kicking a ball, or team or individual sports in general. But we have a handful of diversity, equity, and inclusivity initiatives that we're working on to try and make hockey more accessible and more diverse. But make no mistake about it, it's an expensive sport, so that's part of the issue. But then also the visibility and being able to see yourself, whether you're regardless of race or gender, in those skates, to have that dream or to have that impact in someone's life, to be able to say, hey, like, I want to go to the rink and try to be a hockey player, or insert the sport. So there are a handful of different initiatives, and also the education pieces, and providing our members with these difficult conversations to talk about social justice and injustices, and really have an uncomfortable conversation to open up the dialogue to create a better future.
Did you always have this sort of this ambition to be an Olympic athlete? Like, at what point you did?
Yeah. So actually, I was lucky and fortunate because I had a really strong female role model in my mother. When I was growing up, I turned to my grandmother, and I don't know what I had seen on TV or what was going on. I could have been watching the Jetsons, who knows? And I said, I'm going to be in the Olympics. And I was like 5 years old. And I remember my mom's telling me this story. And she said that my grandmother pulled her aside and said, Cynthia, girls don't play hockey. And my mom said, get with the times. If she wants to play hockey, she's going to play hockey. And that was before hockey was like an Olympic sport. I just knew that, I fell in love with the sport, and I wanted to take it to the highest level. And I just wanted to be another hockey player, regardless of, my gender, and if there were opportunities on the women's side.
And were you, when did you first start playing hockey? What age were you?
When I was about 5.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's part, you have to sign up and get started early to make it to a high level. But, we've seen adult hockey grow tremendously in the US, which has been great. But obviously right now, a little issue of getting people on the ice with a global pandemic.
And how talk to me about how you overcame adversity and any doubts you had all the way up to kind of 2018 Olympics.
Yeah, well, probably similar to most people on this Zoom, is you have to lean on people. It takes a team behind the team for one person's success, and you're never going the road alone. So regardless of the obstacle, it's really, figuring out how to problem solve with all these other amazing individuals, and assembling your team and your mentors to make sure that you have the right, thought leaders and guidance as you navigate the future. But, regardless of what we do, it's never easy, but, as long as you've got the right people supporting you, it definitely makes it easier.
And you talked a little bit about the new hockey league. What makes it more sustainable than traditional leagues?
Yeah, well, we've never had a sustainable professional hockey league. I've played in a handful of different semi-pro leagues, and one folded, which was unfortunate. But we've never had the appropriate platform or the future carved out for the sport that looked long-term. So to be able to have the NHL club support us and see value in what we're doing is tremendous. And I'm really excited for the lengths that this sport can go and grow, because in very, very many cases, we're still in our infancy as a sport. So it's, 10 years from now, I can look back and be like, oh my gosh, we were a part of this movement, and we helped create a standard for the future. But we have a lot of work to do until then.
We've talked quite a bit over the last two days about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, and how sponsorship is far more sustainable as it pertains to developing diverse talent in the next generation. What does being a role model for young girls mean to you? Because I assume you've kind of assumed that role based on your success, but also you're actively in it as well.
Yeah, it sort of came naturally as just part of the job. And I think, you know, I was able to grow up in the US program, and I was sort of sistered by, you know, all these amazing women, and you know, they had a hand in my success. And I think being able to reflect and think how important and pivotal it was for, you know, an Angela Ruggiero or a Cami Granado or whomever, to reach out and try and, you know, guide me or give advice, or someone I could just be a sponge around and absorb as much information as possible was so important. And now to have social media the way it is, to now provide more visibility to our sport and be more accessible, of a platform to other girls and younger boys, you see how important it is, because you were one of those younger girls. So now to have that opportunity is something I take with, you know, great pride and honor, to be able to have a positive impact in someone's life, and to do it through sport, let alone. So it's a really cool opportunity, and I consider it one of the best jobs in the world.
And how like beyond the kind of physical and technical skill and training, what kind of support network do you have around you for things like mental wellness, financial wellness, all of those other kind of assets that play into living your best life?
And yeah, you're right. And it takes a team behind the team, right? So, you know, our resources are very scarce, but we make do with what we can. And, you know, I consider each one of those things a pillar to our success, to make sure that, you know, we have the right foundations to be able to go out there and perform and not worry about all these other things, and compartmentalize them, so to speak, to make sure that someone else is guiding me through the different terrains. So you touched on mental health, and I think that's been the most important part of this whole piece, given the global pandemic and so much uncertainty, and, you know, our schedules and competitions getting canceled, is taking a step back, having the time to reflect, not traveling as much, but then also trying to utilize that time and think, you know, how can I grow as a person and as an athlete? And then also, how do I maintain a healthy status, right? Instead of sitting on Zoom all the time and getting, you know, distracted by all these other things. So it's, I don't want to say I have it figured out, but definitely having the appropriate people in your camp is really instrumental to success.
And you also, you made a reference to the expense of the sport, and just going back to accessibility again, how there's a question from Emily here about how can we make sports like hockey more accessible to those who can't afford it. What can we do there? What is being done there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's different grassroots programs depending on where you are in the world, and specifically under USA Hockey as an organization. You know, we have different initiatives of try hockey for free, but, you know, I'd love to see, you know, ability to cut down ice costs to get kids on ice for the first time, right? And have that more consistent than, you know, just a handful of dates on the calendar. And I know that's easier said than done. And in addition to that, providing equipment packages that follow children all the way up through high school, and other resources and fun training technologies, and whether that's wearables or apps that we can provide to make it a little bit more interactive of a process when the kids are, or the children are, away from the rink. But part of it is, you don't stumble upon hockey by mistake, right? You have to know somebody in order to get introduced to the game. So that's part of the problem. But yeah, I think, to be honest, to cut down ice costs, you know, whether that's flipping our infrastructure on its head and figuring out how do we make it more efficient to put up ice in the summer or whatnot, but then also provide the equipment and the right environment and resources for kids to get on the ice and stay on the ice longer.
And what's next for the National Hockey League? Are you where are you with the next Olympics?
Oh boy. So I think it was just announced that World Championships is going to move forward this spring, which is really exciting. That's in Halifax. And then from there, I mean, we're less than a year out from the Winter Games. So continuing to train as an Olympic hopeful, and we have to defend a gold medal. I mean, that's the big thing. So, and then in addition to that, juggling sort of the professional landscape and trying to build in these resources and training tools for all these phenomenal women who you won't necessarily see on the world stage at the Olympics. So, and some of them you will. So there's a lot of things that are going on. I keep busy a lot of the times, but really looking forward to just hopping on the ice with the rest of the squad and being able to play hockey.
That's awesome. And then Hilary, what other countries do you look at that you kind of see are kind of doing some interesting things in this space?
Yeah, I mean, Canada is our biggest rival, and I always think that they do things very well because I feel like we're always chasing them, and I don't necessarily know it looks like that on paper, but it's been amazing to see is the development of the Finnish national team, because years ago when I entered this program, they weren't necessarily a part of the conversation as one of the big rivals, and now they've entered in. 2 years ago was the first time they were in a final gold medal game at World Championships, and they've really invested a lot in their players, and I think it goes to show.
Final couple of questions. What actions can we take right now to create equity in sport?
Oh my gosh. Where do I begin? No, I think being conscious of where you spend your dollar, and to be able to promote women's sports when you can, to tune in when you can, whether it's buying things, it doesn't matter, anything helps, but I think being conscious of where your dollar is going and how it's being spent is extremely important, and also pushing for more coverage, right? I think it's not necessarily just on the athletes, it's on the viewers as well. So continue to engage with your favorite athletes and continue to do what we all do to push women's equity forward in our own way.
It's interesting because we had a session on women in sports on Worth Live a couple of months ago, and we were talking about how corporations are paying more attention to women's sports in terms of sponsorship. Are you seeing that come through in the hockey space?
We're starting to see a little bit of it come through. We're still very much in our infancy compared to like a soccer, or a basketball. But I think it's wonderful to see that more dollars and more recognition is getting placed into the women's environment for sports. So I think we're at this crux where I think we're just going to continue to climb, and it's wonderful to see. Obviously, we wish it happened years and years ago, but it's finally happening now. And whenever you can get more corporations to sign up and believe in what you do and place value behind it, you're going to go further.
And thoughts on how we can start scaling progress, and what advice would you give to any young women watching, or people with young daughters that have an ambition to be in the Olympics?
Oh my goodness. Just show up, and it's part of it is you show up because you signed up for the sport you love and you just want to continue to be there. But I found for me, I was lucky because I knew what I wanted to do, or I thought I knew what I wanted to do, and a lot of that came from goal setting and to be able to write down where I wanted to be and different milestones, the lofty ones and then also the realistic ones, and to figure out different avenues and how to get there, and then also have some reflection and say, okay, like, am I going in the appropriate direction that I laid out, or do I need to kind of pivot and shift and go in a different one, or what's working, what isn't working? But never forget why you signed up to do something. And I know it gets tough, but just see it through. If it's a passion of yours, you can do it.
You're incredibly inspiring, and we talk a lot about intentional leadership, and we've talked about intentional leadership throughout. And it just listening to you and your focus and your goal setting, you come across as someone that has so much intention when it comes to the things that you're trying to achieve. So I just want to say thank you so much. An absolute inspiration. And good luck with the rest of the Hockey League and the Winter Olympics and the PWHPA. Thank you so much, Hilary.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on. That was Hilary Knight. She is changing the landscape for women in sports and fought for the pay equity for the Hockey League. Thank you again, Hilary, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.